Good evening. How is everybody?
Good.
Okay, so I'm Allison. I'm the director of the library. I've been working here for 17 years over, and I just became director in October. There's Taylor. She's the assistant director now. So I want to welcome you. Also, the library is fresh and clean. We just had the carpets cleaned yesterday. And then actually the air you're breathing is much better too. We cleaned all the ductwork. So, good thing, especially if you're in the building 10 hours a day, you know. So welcome you here. Enjoy doing the program here with the Sawyer County Historical Society. And also want to welcome you the inaugural use of our blinds. The blinds were purchased through the 100 Who Care. So if you know someone with 100 Who Care, thank them. You'll enjoy the use of them. You'll see the shades go down a little bit. But that's for when programming like this. If it was summer, you know, it'd be full sun in here, hard to see. So, yeah, so welcome to the library. The other thing, there's some handouts, some of our activities. If you want, when you signed in, if you want to receive our email, which is just once a month with our programming, sign up. And then also we have a big Celebrate Your Library on June 14th. It'll start, we're having a fun run, we're having bingo, we're having 3 yogas, bowl singing, silent auction or a raffle. We're still trying to decide that, but lots of things going on all day. So hopefully you guys can come to that. So without further ado, and I will be blowing the shades.
We'd like to thank you all for coming. A few things we have before we get started. We start our summer hours at the Historical Society Museum, which is on Highway B, right after Memorial Day. If anybody here is interested in being a docent, we need help. We're open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, noon to 4, so if anybody would like to volunteer, we'd be glad to have you. Our speaker tonight is Don Allison, the grandson of Charlie Allison, the caretaker at the HIDEOUT. I have read his book. If you're interested in the history of this area, it's a must-read. So, with further ado, Don.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I thank Guy Houston, too, for the invitation and all those that were involved. It's a pleasure to be here. And I have to tell you that I'm not much of a speaker, and I'm a little bit nervous to be up here. And I've been told that when you're nervous about speaking in front of a crowd, just picture them naked. And I have to tell you, it's not a pretty picture. And it doesn't help. So anyway, I think everyone has a story to tell. And my story, for me, is my granddad. I think we all would like to have somebody famous in their background, in their family. Perhaps a royalty, or someone famous anyway, and maybe someone who's infamous. Well, closest I have a granddad, and he was a dear man to me. But where do I start to tell you about my granddad? I think I have to start by telling you about my grandmother. She moved in with our family shortly after I was born, in the winter of 1945-46. And growing up, she was a natural part of our family. I didn't know families might be any other way but to have someone else living with us. We had a cousin and an uncle living with us at the same time, and that was family to us. And so I never questioned why she was not with Granddad until I grew a little older. And she helped raise me while my parents both worked. My dad was roofing, he did a lot of roofing. My mother was a waitress. And Grandma worked for a time at a restaurant. I would spend a lot of time with Grandma as she made rag rugs. She had a loom in her apartment above our garage. And I would spend time listening to her tell stories about her early life and her life with Grandpa. And I heard my dad tell stories as well. And they were the same stories. They agreed with what she said. And in summer times, we would vacation here. We'd come up and visit family. And we'd see Granddad. And the woman living with him. And he would tell us stories. And they would match what Grandma said and what Granddad said. And so I believe those stories are true, and they meant something to me. And so I jotted a lot of these things down. I was always one who liked to keep notes and hear stories like that, and wanted to keep them alive. And little bit by little, I learned of their lives, and I wanted to know more about them as I got older, what was true, what was not. And I learned that Charlie was born in 1887. He had 2 older sisters, and at the age of 4, his mother died. And his father couldn't care for them. And so he had to place them in an orphanage. Charlie's sisters were adopted out before he turned 8, and he never saw them again. But he wasn't adopted until he was about 14. He was adopted by the Allisons, and not to be a son, but to be a worker on the Allisons' farm. He claimed that his father was actually an Owens, Welch. And I think I found a birth certificate or return of birth that shows the same date that he was born to an Owens in the same city he says he was born. And I'm quite sure that that is my grandfather's certificate of birth. I never did find a record of his adoption. But I did learn from Charlie that he hated his parents. Being a worker and not a son, they beat him, they worked him hard, they treated him really bad. And their only other child was a girl. They had a daughter who was at that time 18, and she was married and gone, so he was the only one left on the farm. And their farm was in decline. And they were forced to move. Now they were in they were in Augusta, Illinois at the time. And they moved by wagon 120 miles to Bellflower, Missouri. And my grandmother told that she first saw Charlie and the family. Well, she tells it was in a covered wagon. It was a wagon. In the distance, coming across a hillside, and they came up to the farm to water their stock and to talk with folks there about where they might be able to set up. They came to the farm of the Beans. My grandmother was a Bean. It was John W. and Mary Bean. They had 9 children, 4 boys, and the older 4 girls were already married and gone, so there was Lola, and, back up here again. There was just Lola and her brothers living with them. And she said she was sitting on a fence when she saw them. And the boys got together and talked, the men talked, the ladies talked, and she watched these boys, Charlie, a stocky young man, powerfully built, and she had eyes for him, I guess. Well, her dad suggested to Allison that they set up an abandoned farm just a couple miles away, and so they did that. And the Beans and the Allisons worked together to help get established. The land was poor, and the Allisons, because of the way they came by wagon, they were considered to be gypsies by many of the locals. And that resulted in numerous fights for Charlie with the locals, boys at school, and even with his teacher. Charlie told me that he had enough of that teacher. He didn't care for schooling anyway. He was smart, but he didn't enjoy school at all. And he didn't like the fights he had to have with the other boys. And he didn't like the teacher at all, and they got into a spat. And he told how he literally threw the teacher out of the building and told the kids, "Go home now, school's out." And he left, and he never went back to school. He was determined to be on his own. Well, Charlie labored for a number of years more, and he helped out the Beans regularly whenever he could. And sometimes he would get paid for that labor. There was very little money available to any of them at that time, but he knew he needed to get away. He knew he needed money to do that. And so he was delighted, he was glad to get what money he could. And he saved that up. And Bean knew, no doubt he knew of Charlie's dislike for his parents. And he probably knew that Charlie had a liking for Lola. And Grandma Lola told me one day, she says, as we got older, she says, Charlie and I, we went off together, she said. And they were married in Wellsville, Missouri in August of 1908. That was about 15 miles away. And they started their life together at that time. And that was their marriage license. Now Charlie, he had no trouble finding jobs. He was very handy. He was able to do carpentry and other kinds of things. But few jobs lasted very long. And he ended up moving to Northwoods from Wellsville. And he worked there for Linrow Products Company. It was a factory job, and he hated it. And he hated the people that he had to work with. There was a lot of favoritism. The foreman would, he had his people, his friends, and he took care of them. And people he didn't like, he made them work all the harder. And so Charlie, he got tired of that, and the favoritism and all, and so he moved from there to Girard. And there he began working in the coal mines. Now, I never knew about coal mines in Illinois, but there were a number of them, and he worked in a number of them as well. At that time, Charlie was 21 and Lola was 19. And they followed the mines as they'd opened, and as they closed, they played out. And from there, they moved to Verdun, Illinois. They continued to move a little bit north each time they moved. And they lived there about 4 or 5 years. And there, Charlie met a man by the name of Brian Bolton. Some references call him Byron Bolton. He knew him as Brian. The two had similar personalities. They hit it off. And Bolton had a lot of influence with the miners and with the foreman because he was a supplier to them for liquor. And he helped Charlie get a job in the mines. And he also helped Charlie and Lola get established by finding a place for them to stay and rent it out as a boarding house. And in turn, he provided liquor for Charlie to sell at the boarding house and the community. He had organized the farmers in the area. Many of them had a little bit of extra grain, and they would turn that grain into alcohol. And that was another form of money for them too. Well, he'd collect a gallon here, a gallon there, he'd gather it all together, and he'd be able to distribute it then to the people that he was supplying and to Chicago a little bit at a time. Now, the liquor that was made was oftentimes made not just from corn. They might have used potatoes, fruit, other kinds of things, beets, and occasionally something would be added, maybe a little bit of kerosene or glycerin to add a little bit of flavor, give it a little kick. It didn't sound good to me. And that's where the term blind drunk comes from as well. Because oftentimes there was methyl alcohol mixed in there. And that will make a person go blind. And anyway, a lot of that alcohol was shipped to Chicago. Bolton had ties with a number of people there. And meanwhile, in Millwood, back in Millwood, that was about 10 miles difference, 9 miles away, I guess. Charlie's dad was in town and he fell over dead in the middle of the street, is what the story was. And Charlie didn't care. He had no interest in whether his dad was dead or alive. But Lola convinced him that they should go to the funeral. And so they did. They took an interurban. There was a lot of these, I guess. I didn't realize this, but these ran up and down the border of Illinois and other places, I guess. And they used that to get to Millwood. And when they got there, it was springtime and wet and rainy, muddy. And the hearse was pulled by a couple of horses through the mud, and it would get bogged down, and some of the men who were in the line following the hearse would end up having to push the hearse from time to time, and that included Charlie. And Lola told me that she said, "Charlie, you're gonna get your clothes all muddy." And he said, "I don't care. I want to see this man in the ground." Well, as a result of his death, his stepmom was unable to run the farm by herself. And Charlie, again, didn't care. He hated her. Let her rot was his reaction. But Lola said, "You cannot be so heartless, Charlie." So finally he relented, and Elmira, his mother, stepmother, moved into the farm, or moved in with them. And again, another mine, this mine he was working in, closed again, and they moved again. And always northward, as I say, closer to Chicago each time. That was his dream, was to get into a big city where there were jobs and opportunity. He knew there was something better out there than the farms and the coal mines. And again, Brian Bolton was there to help him out. There was a loyalty between these friends. And this lasted throughout life, their life, this combination of loyalty and heartlessness as well. But Bolton helped them out again, and they were able to take in boarders at the next place, which was another coal mine. And Charlie worked there at that place as a muleteer. He was wearing harnesses, and he hired a couple boys to help feed the mules and haul the waste out. And these muleteers were required to be there early before the miners so that they could get things ready for the miners to work. And there'd be one mule, it seems like, he was telling me, there's one mule at the face where they're taking the coal out, and they move it up to a gangway where more carts were joined, additional mules hauled it out to the tipple of the head. And something I learned as well was that the mines were not vertical and not completely horizontal, but they were at an angle, which helped mules take the loads out because they were going slightly down all the time. Gravity helped them. And there was utter blackness inside. All they had was carbide lights, carbide lamps to see by. And there was always a danger of explosions or poisoning from the gases. It was cold, it was damp. They called it the black damp. It was evidently a terrible way to live. The mules that were in the mines, many of them stayed in the mines all of their life. They were so used to being in the dark that once any of them got out, or some of them, if they got out into the sunlight again, it was next to impossible to get them back into the mine. They romp around and just refused to go back in the mine, so they kept them in the mines for their whole lives. One of Charlie's friends, Shorty Knudsen, fell down a mine shaft, and he ended up with a broken leg, injured back, and he was unable to work. And Charlie said, we need to take him in. And Lola says, we don't have any room, we can't take him in. Well, make room. We took in Elmira, we can take in Shorty. One dinner time at the boarding house, a couple of the men got into an argument. And it grew very heated. And one of the men pulled a gun. And Charlie, seeing this, he tried to stop them. And in the wrestle, he was shot in the leg. And the interesting thing to me was that stopped the fight. The man who did the shooting apologized, and there was no further action. Life was a lot different then. And while healing, Bolton got a job for Charlie as a powder monkey in the mines. With that job, it wasn't so laborious. And he would go into the mines at the end of the day when everybody else was out. And they would set the charges and set the blast so that overnight the dust and the gases could dissipate. And there was a lot more that came from the mines. I always think of taking coal out of the mines, but there was a lot more than coal. There was slate, and there was rock, and other kinds of matter that had to be separated from the coal. They called it gob. And that had to be taken out as well, so it wasn't just the coal. And yet their hours varied a great deal. It depended a lot on the demand of coal, whether it was in the wintertime perhaps, and people needed coal to heat their homes, factories, railroads. As the need increased and decreased, the hours on the job changed as well, and accordingly, along with that, their pay varied a great deal too. And when the mines closed, Charlie needed some income. When this one closed, he ended up working for 50 cents a day, making chicken crates. Well, by then he had 2 kids. He had a daughter and a son. Velma was the daughter, and Orrin, Bud, was my dad. And at that time, that was the time when World War I started. And so he had to register for the draft. Well, World War I, with the draft on, and so many people going into the service, that took laborers out of the farm fields. Consequently, as farmers became soldiers, farm production dropped off, the demand for food increased, and that was worldwide. Demand for food continually grew. And so Charlie got a job then going into the Dakotas following the wheat harvest. And he made good money doing that. He worked in North Dakota, Kansas, Minnesota, and after the fall harvest, after the harvest was completed, he would return to the coal mines and take a job again. And then there was the flu epidemic in 1918, and that hit so many people, killed so many people. Grandma told how in the little town they were in then, there were funerals almost every day. And everyone in the family eventually got it. But neighbors helped neighbors then. They had to get by. It was a different world than it is today. At that time, Bud was about 4 years old, and he got pneumonia. And he was a small boy, and they took him to the hospital and had to drain his lungs. And to do that, they had to put insert a tube into his lungs. And because he was so small, they had to remove a rib. I remember seeing that hole when I was a boy. When he had his shirt off, I could see that hole, and I asked him about it. He told me about how he had pneumonia, and they drained that lung. And you know, the interesting thing is that the total bill was $16. That amazed me. Well then, we get up to 1919, and the mines closed again, and Bolton, who was in Chicago then, invited Charlie to come up again. He said, I got a plan. I got things going here. And so Charlie moved to Chicago, the north end of Chicago. He got a job in construction. They were building roads in the Fox River Grove, Crystal Lake, Perry area. And that was, that kept him going for a while until he finally got a job at Anheuser-Busch. And there again, he was mending harnesses, and he was driving teams. And then 1920, Prohibition. It amazed me to find that Anheuser-Busch went from producing beer and alcohol to making ice cream and other products. But along with that, Charlie lost his job. And Bolton had many connections with the Chicago outfit then that they called the South Side Gang. The South Side Gang, or the organization. And its head at that time was, do I have him? I don't have him. Was a man by the name of Colosimo. That was early. Colosimo had the control of the South Side Gang, and he was well respected in that at that time. You know, this what amazed me too was that in Chicago at that time there was some 1,500 gangs. All of them competed for the market, and oftentimes crossing borders with territory. The Colosseum had an idea that to prevent that, to prevent some of the hardship and violence that was happening, he wanted to organize the gangs and to get them to agree on territories. And he started doing that. And there was a man by the name of Johnny Torrio, Papa Johnny, worked for Colosimo at the time. Now Colosimo, he was, as the head of the Southside gang, he was into gambling, and he was into prostitution and things of that nature, but he would not go into alcohol because prohibition. He wouldn't do that. And Torrio and him disagreed. At that time, Al Capone was working as a bouncer and a bartender in one of Colosimo's establishments. But because Colosimo refused to join the bootlegging, Torrio had him killed. And he took over the gang. And he took Capone with him as his right-hand man. Now, Torrio was an organizational genius. He was widely respected, as Colosimo was, but he wanted to expand their activities. It's like diversification in a business. The more you diversify, the stronger you might be. And that's what they were. They're businessmen. And so as Torrio, he brought gangs together and continued that process. And it was a process of taking those territories and dividing them up. One gang might have an area next to another, and as people will, they'll crowd into another's territory, and stuff would happen. But so it was a continuous process to negotiate with these people so that they could agree on their territories. Well, he continued organizing those gangs, and one of those gangs was a large gang and a competitor. It was the Northside gang, and Dean O'Banion, I think I have a shot of him. Nope, Capone, O'Banion. He was the head of the Northside gang. And he and Torrio knew each other, disliked each other. They were fierce competitors. And his right-hand man was a fellow by the name of Jaime Weiss. Well, it turns out that O'Banion had a brewery, Seaman Brewery, among others. And he learned that the police were going to raid it. And thinking quickly, what he did was he contacted Torrio, said, "Have I got a deal for you? And for $500,000 cash, you can have this." Well, Torrio thought that was a pretty good deal. Sounds like a lot of money to me. But anyway, the deal was made, the money paid, and the next day, or a couple days later, the police raided it. Torrio was arrested. Capone was arrested. Capone stayed in jail just for a short time. Torrio was in for a longer time, and he was not happy. He learned that O'Banion had conned him, and he wanted him killed. Well, this got out among the people around there, and a fellow by the name of Mike Merlo. He was known as a fixer. He was another negotiator. He convinced Torrio, hold on, let's not do this, not now. And Torrio gave in, said, all right, we won't take him out. But it wasn't but a short time later, Merlo died. He had cancer, and he died. Well, he was the head of the some unions in that area, and he was in with not only the unions but the Democratic Party. But after he died, all bets were off, and Torrio had O'Banion killed. Now that was interesting. O'Banion had a flower shop, and Torrio had some men sent to the flower shop to buy some flowers for a funeral that was going on. The story is that one of the men shook hands while the other two shot him, killed him. As a consequence, Jaime Weiss took over the North Side Gang, and he ordered Torrio and Capone killed. Well, an attempt on Capone failed, but it scared him. Weiss is known as, I think I have a shot of that, the only man Capone feared. And it was because the attempt on Capone's life that Capone feared him. 12 days later, this group went out to kill Torrio, and he and his wife were outside their home when they were ambushed, and Torrio was shot numerous times, but he wasn't killed. He was taken to the hospital, and he refused to talk, and he slowly recovered, but when he did, he handed the gang over to Capone. He said, "That's it, Al, I'm done. I'm going to Europe." Well, Capone was just 26 at the time, and he, like Torrio, liked to have victimless crimes. He knew that to cause harm to his clients did him no good as a businessman. And so he favored booze, gambling, prostitution, things like that. And he also was known as a Robin Hood because he opened a number of soup kitchens in the Chicago area that helped people who were destitute at the time. An interesting note here, I see. Prohibition didn't end the production of alcohol entirely. It prohibited the sale and transport, but not the use in some cases. Some religious use, taking wine, medicinal use, you could get a doctor's prescription that allowed you to get a pint every 10 days. So there were ways of getting the alcohol that most people don't think about. And once again, Bolton arranged for Charlie and Lola to run a hotel this time, and the soup kitchen. And it was in a poor neighborhood. And what they did was they, continuing the practice, they put a still in the basement of the hotel. And they ran the condensing coils up to the attic where it was tapped off. So it ran up along the chimney into the attic. And Bolton arranged for supplies to come to the to be delivered to the hotel, and business as usual took place there, while Charlie ran the soup kitchen. Now, his soup kitchen was little more than a tin shed. It wasn't very fancy at all. And he hired some help, of course. And one of the fellows they hired, he told me about, was a man by the name of Pearl Robinson. And he chuckled when he told me about him, because Pearl had his legs amputated at the knees. So he was very short when he shuffled around. And he had shoes devised to fit on the stubs of his legs. And he wore them backwards. So it was, must have been an interesting thing. Pearl was there, not as a cook or anything, but he was hired to help clean up the place and keep it neat and clean. And here again, Bolton showed up. He introduced Charlie to a man by the name of Fred Getz. Now, Getz went by other names as well. He was known as Van Ash, Anish, a number of things, but he was also known as Shotgun George Ziegler. And he would prove to be a very important man in Charlie's future, as Bolton had been. And then later, Bolton introduced Charlie to Nitty. Well, they came to the soup kitchen one day, and they brought another man with them by the name of Greco, Nick Greco. And Greco sat apart from the others while Bolton and Nitty talked business with Charlie. And Greco sat at the counter, had a cup of coffee, and Lola was there helping out. And they got into a conversation. And she noticed him, a very neat-looking man, brown fedora, brown suit, brown shoes, and a lump in his jacket that she saw was the butt of a gun. She had asked him about his work, what he does for a living. He said, I'm in collections. And once she saw the gun, though, she says, well, I didn't ask much more about him. But a spark might have been kindled between the two of them, because he became an important man for me later on as I was a boy, because he would show up later. Now, back at the hotel, I don't have a picture of it. At the hotel, a man by the name of Knudsen, Shorty Knudsen, was minding the still. And a fire broke out. And it got out of control. And in that neighborhood, they had very little protection, fire protection. And there was little they could do but call the neighbors. And the neighbors would come and try to help get everything out that they could. And word got to Charlie at the soup kitchen, and he hurried back to see what was going on. And by the time he got there, the hotel had collapsed. There was nothing left but the chimney with the copper tubes waving like a flag at the top. And he said he couldn't do anything but laugh. But he still had the soup kitchen. He also had competitors. There was Bob and Alec White, who also ran a soup kitchen a couple blocks away. And they were responsible for a number of incidents that occurred at Charlie's soup kitchen. There was grease poured in front of the doorway. There was stick jammed into the lock. There was windows broken. There was a number of things that acts of vandalism like that took place. And Charlie had he suspected them. He couldn't prove it, but he suspected they were behind it all. And then two men arrived at his soup kitchen one day, and they sat at the counter, and they ordered soup and a sandwich or whatever, and some beer, and it was delivered to them. And then they introduced themselves as federal marshals, and they arrested Charlie and put him in jail. He learned later that Bob and Alec White had informed on him. They arranged it. But while he was in jail, they questioned him about who were your suppliers, who were you working for, all those kinds of things. And Charlie wouldn't talk. He refused to tell anything about anybody. And there's some FBI notes that mention Bolton. Back. Don't hit the wrong button, people. There we go. Anyway, the notes mentioned Bolton and Charlie and some of the things that took place, and Bolton's statements. But the fact that Charlie wouldn't talk went well with the gang. They appreciated his loyalty, and they rewarded him for it. Nick appeared at the beanery, the soup kitchen, one day. Charlie was still in jail. Lola was there attending the place, and Nick showed up in his typical brown suit, and he said, "I've got something for you here. This is for Charlie. He'll be out pretty soon, and I want you to give him this." And he handed over an envelope, and Lola said, "Should I open it or what?" "Go ahead, open it." And she did, and found 4 $100 bills, and she was just beside herself. She had never seen so much money in one place in her life. Well, shortly after that, or just before Charlie's release, the soup kitchen caught fire. Arson again, burned to the ground. Bob and Alec White. Well, now, Charlie had no hotel, soup kitchen was gone. He had no means of income, but the friendship he had, the loyalty he had shown to the others. And as a result of that, Getz, Von Ash, or Shotgun Ziegler, he invited Charlie to his resort, not a resort, a retreat here in Couderay. And he and Charlie talked business up there. They talked of Getz's plans for the future. He wanted to create a place where his friends could come and get away for a while. And after several visits, that friendship grew more until Charlie was offered the job as caretaker. Well, he accepted. He was delighted to take it. And so he and Bud moved up to Couderay in the fall of, I'm going to say it was 27 or 28. And in the spring, Lola and Velma came up. And, there's the entrance. One of the first things they did was to hire some men, and the locals in the area, inventory the surroundings for timber and what they could use to continue the building. And yeah, that's we got Lola here and Charlie, and that's them working on the entrance. Well, I'm told that if you go to church, preachers only speak for about 20 minutes, because beyond that, you lose interest. Well, we're well beyond that now, and I don't want to lose your interest, but there are things to say yet. Charlie had hired a number of men to help work there. They moved stones out of the ground and used those for the building. The timber they used. They built the entrance, gazebo, the pier. The pier extended out into the lake quite some ways. The outbuildings. And the women, there's Lola and Velma, they worked just as hard as the men, right side by side with them. And in the winter, they cut ice out of the lake for use in the summer. This is a picture of an ice tractor they used to haul the blocks out and up the hill and get it into the ice house. There was always work to do. But they had time for relaxation too. They enjoyed fishing and hunting. And Charlie found this to be a wonderful place to live. It was safe, it was quiet, it was away from the cities. He could work at his own pace. Who wouldn't love it? and he did. For Getz, it was an opportunity to get away from the heat in Chicago, to invite his friends when they needed to get out of town. And on one particular visit, for 3 weeks in the fall, Capone, with their wives, and with Bolton, Capone, Getz, Killer Burke, and 3 or 4 others who came up. And they spent that time hunting and fishing and talking. At night, the men would get together and make plans. And in the daytime, they'd, like I say, they'd hunt and fish. There was a man by the name of Frank Crandall. He was hired as a guide to take the men duck hunting. Eddie Anderson, he was a guide for fishing. And Bud, a young boy, but he hired boys from town to come out and help drive deer for the men who were deer hunting. And he told me the story more than once of how he put men on stands out in the woods and Capone on one particular rise where he could see all around, and he refused to use a rifle. Instead, he just had 2 pistols and a long coat. And Dad would laugh about how he'd stand in that cold and flap his arms to keep warm and scare every deer away for miles. Most of the meat that they got, they gave to locals. And Grandma Lola told how many of the men were out hunting or fishing, whatever, and she stayed back and was cooking, but Capone was staying there too. Capone helped cook one particular meal where he was cooking spaghetti and from his own sauce recipe. And she said he was such a delightful man, easy man to talk with, pleasant man, like any other businessman, just a pleasant man to be with, and so comfortable in the kitchen. And this is where the plot to kill Bugs Moran took place as well. The men, like I say, they spent their nights talking, and what it was they were talking about was plotting the Valentine's Day massacre. And once plans were made, the men prepared to leave, and they gave gifts out. They took Velma and Lola into, I believe it was Hayward there, where they bought them each fur coats. And they gave Grandpa and my dad guns. They gave him there was a Winchester Model 12 16 gauge, a Model 12 20 gauge, which I have. My brother has the 16. And there was an old model Winchester 22, another brother has. And after they left, it was quiet time, winter time, and Charlie poached deer and sold the meat in Minneapolis and St. Paul. And he told me how one day a friend of his came to him saying, "Charlie, I need some meat." And Charlie says, "I got 13 hanging up in the garage right now. Take what you need." And the guy did. Took off the hindquarters of all 13 deer. That did not go over well. And they were angry. There was some bitterness there for quite some while. And shortly after that, the massacre occurred. They intended to kill Moran, and Bolton again was part of this. And he was one of the people watching for Moran to come to a garage in Chicago. He was offered a deal he couldn't turn down, a truckload of whiskey, I believe it was, at a very good price. And they were to pick it up at a certain garage on Clark Street. And Bolton and a couple others were watching from an apartment across the street, and they saw these men come, and they thought one of them was Moran, and so they gave the signal to the rest that he's here, time to do it. And they did it. 7 men were killed. But Moran, he was late. He survived. It all happened before he got there. But so many of his top people were killed that his gang ended at that time. Well, Capone never returned to the retreat. Getz left, began his own bootlegging operation in Kansas. And he sold the retreat to Ed O'Hare, Easy Eddie. Easy Eddie O'Hare. And I came here to Hayward some years ago, and I wanted to learn who owned that property. I wanted to see the history of who owned that property over the years. And I was told that those records have disappeared. And I have my own theories about why they disappeared, and you might not like it, but here it is. The economy here depends a lot on the mystery and the history of that property. And I believe that those records disappeared because if the truth were known that Capone did not own the property, I think it would have made a big difference to many people. But I have no proof of that. And maybe those records have shown up again. I don't know. It would be nice if somebody could look into that again. Do you have something about that?
Yes, I wrote a book
Yeah.
on the history of historic Hayward and Sawyer County, and I researched Al Capone and the hideout, and the records are up in the
They are
courthouse.
there again?
When the property was sold to lawyers, well,
The bank took it over.
Capone never put his name on it.
No, he didn't.
And so his lawyers were the ones that enacted
And
the
O'Hare was the
transition.
lawyer. Yeah.
But the real estate company never filed at the courthouse until after Capone went to prison.
Okay.
So
All right.
to hide, so that the feds could not find the property.
Mhm. All right. Now, O'Hare had 2 daughters and a son. And his son, of course, was Eddie O'Hare. And he came up here with a girlfriend once, Ursula Sue Granada. He wanted to marry her. But she wanted a church wedding. But he was Catholic, and he had a divorce. And he had, he needed discount, I don't know what to call it. He needed approval from the church to be married again.
Annulment.
Pardon?
It's called an annulment?
Annulment,
Yes.
perhaps. And because of that, they couldn't have a church wedding, so she wouldn't marry him. Yeah, dispensation. But O'Hare would end up being killed before they could marry. And it's interesting that Nitty ended up marrying her at a later date. Now, Capone's son was Butch O'Hare, same age as my dad, within a couple of months. And Dad said that he was a chubby little boy, lazy, and he didn't have much to say about it, and that was good. But he did prove himself in the war by saving a ship and shooting down some Japanese, and ended up being killed himself. And of course, O'Hare Field is now named after him. And I think I'm running over my time here. So what I'm going to do, there's so much more to this story, but I've kept you a long time.
I think you keep going.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah.
don't know. Well, this is, all right, I'll tell you a little bit more then.
So you left out at O'Hare.
What's that?
You left off with
I
O'Hare.
left off with O'Hare. When he was killed.
Yep, and then Frank Nitti married the girl.
Pardon?
Frank Nitti married the girl.
Yep, yep. And,
World War II or Korean War?
that was the Second World War,
Okay.
yeah. There's speculation that says that Butch got into the Western Military Academy because his dad turned state's evidence against Capone. We don't know that for sure. I don't know that for sure, anyway. Anyway, he visited regularly. He came up without warning oftentimes. And he had left orders that no one, without exception, no one is to be on his property, except those that you need to, as workers. But a ball game occurred between Couderay and Radisson. And at the end of the game, Couderay won, and Charlie invited everybody back to the retreat to celebrate. And they came back, and they partied, and they had a good time. And O'Hare showed up. And he said, I told you, nobody comes here. Get up. Fired my grandpa then and there. And so Charlie was out of a job again, but he had some money, and he bought what was Dave's Tavern. And I don't know if you read it, it says Dave's Tavern, it also says Charlie's. So there it is. Charlie's daughter, Velma, she married a man from Milwaukee, Perry Apfel. And with Charlie's help, they built the Keystone. And there was, I've been told that the rock all came from, like most of it around here, out of the fields and out of the rivers, but that the keystones in the doors and in the windows came from the Dakotas. I don't know if there's any truth to that or not. And they hired a woman to watch their children. The woman's name was Mattie Patterson, and she was there in Couderay. Her husband was pretty mean, evidently, and she was taking care of the children, and that's when Charlie met her, and a relationship began. Well, about this time, Perry bought a dance hall. He wanted to open a dance hall, and so he found a business that was closed in Stone Lake. It was a former casino dance hall. And with the help of Charlie and another gentleman, they took a chainsaw and they cut the building into 3 chunks. And they hauled it to Couderay and put it back together, and that became the Pixie Club. Yeah, and that became Charlie's home after some time, years later. With the war, business struggled, and tourism dropped off. And to make ends meet, Charlie took a job. He went out west. Actually, he went to Alaska. He went out to California to sign up for construction in Alaska. And a shipload of men were up there to help build military bases, air bases, and things like that during the war. And while there, he negotiated with one of the Aleuts for a walrus tusk cribbage board. I have that at home.
Nice.
He brought that back, and he sent money back to my dad, to Mattie, and sometimes a little to Lola. when he got home, he told Lola, "Get out. I'm done with you. You get out of here or I'm gonna kill you." And this was in the middle of winter, just January, right after Christmas. And out into the cold she went. She went over to a neighbor's for the night and to get protection for a while, and that woman provided enough money for a train ticket to Janesville, where she showed up at our door. And that's, when I was born, she showed up, and that's why, like I said in the beginning, she was with our family, because of that. And she got an apartment at first, and she worked at a little place called Elmer's Tower in Janesville. And my dad built a garage on a cinder block, and it was 2 stories. He built an apartment on the top so that she could move in there. And one day, she was at the diner when a man came in. Brown fedora, brown suit, brown shoes. And she said, "Nick, how did you find me here?" And he says, "Remember, I'm a collector. I'm a collector for the organization. I know how to find people." Well, they traveled the country together for a couple of years. And then Nick disappeared. And Lola was devastated. There was no word for several years. And finally, Patricia, Nick's oldest daughter, wrote a letter to Lola and explained that he was killed in Chicago. He shot down. So the lives of these people all seem to end pretty much the same way. Now, Charlie, well, that's him at 83. I took that picture. He and my dad were talking. And there's more that could be said, but I'll leave it here. That's enough. So, I hope you enjoyed. Yeah.
My grandfather was the master stonemason that built the hideout.
But
He
they,
was one of the locals from Hayward.
okay,
So
that's
he
good to
was
know.
the one that, and he also built St. Francis Mission too.
yeah,
And most of any brick or rock building that you see in Hayward
Yeah.
is owned at my family.
I'd like to get his name.
John Boyle.
John Boyle.
Did he build a home? Did he build a home, a stone house in Couderay and here now?
You know, there was other builders too.
Okay.
The
Um,
Porter
How was-
Brothers, have you heard of them at the same time?
I wonder.
The Porter.
The last name, how was it spelled?
Boyle.
Y-L-E, okay.
Springbrook?
And he talked about, I mean, when they were working on it, they were fed well, and they stayed out there. He didn't come back into town, they stayed out there. And of course, they got a little whiskey, and he was an Irishman, so.
The local legend, I'm from Gordon. The Enchanted Inn is one of 2 big mansions, well, summer cabins for people that would come up from Chicago to vacation. And the Enchanted Inn has a stone fireplace that we were told the same person that put together Al Capone's hideout
Okay,
put together that fireplace.
that big fireplace?
Yeah,
That's beauty.
so
Was,
Where's that?
Enchanted Inn in Gordon, almost to Barnes.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah,
That could very well be.
County Road Y, that's the story I've always
The
heard.
fireplace that is outside of, on Highway B and C.
Okay.
CC, that fireplace my grandfather built in the 20s, and it was in Sliver Wells' cabin, and the DNR bought that property, and they were just gonna bulldoze it and push it in. They actually, Ray from Ray J's had a front end loader pick it up and drove it miles down the road, bouncing around. And that's outside.
Okay.
That's how well that's built.
Holy cow. Yeah, there was, I always get it wrong, I think it was a police commissioner that owned Enchanted Inn, and Mooney's,
And that would be my grandfather.
because, the other one's the Mooney
I can tell
Mansion.
by the way they split the rock.
Okay,
My dad also was an historian, but obviously he was too young to do that.
okay.
Any other questions or comments? Go ahead.
Well, one person in the audience is an Owens from Birchwood. I just wondered if there's any family connection.
No, I'm sure not, because they were from Missouri.
Oh, okay.
Missouri.
Don, I'm a local area historian, and I bought your book and read it, enjoyed it very much, found it very interesting. If anybody doesn't have the book, I strongly recommend it. And just a lot of fun to read, so thank you for writing it, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I was actually born in Springfield, Illinois.
Were you?
From Springfield.
Okay.
And my family had a farm south of Springfield in Cantrell, Illinois.
Yeah.
And we had a coal mine on that farm that was run by Brian Eddy, rented the mine from us. And I just wonder if you have heard of that mine before in your...
There are a lot of mines there that open and close, and the names are a long list. So I don't know what mines he worked in. Any other questions, any other comments?
I just feel that it isn't fair for the Capone people and so on to say there were victimless crimes when the houses of prostitution, those women were victims.
Oh, yeah,
It
definitely.
was men who said it was victimless.
Right. Right.
I have a comment.
All right.
Over this way, please.
Yes.
My wife's grandfather was Eddie Anderson, that guided Al Capone, and her grandmother Eliza Anderson worked, for the family up there. And there have been stories over the years of how nice of people they actually were. And your grandfather and my wife's grandfather are actually only about 50 feet apart in the cemetery.
Is that right? Right now?
Right now.
Right now
In the Couderay Evergreen Cemetery.
I want to thank everybody for your attention and your kindness. No tomatoes were thrown. That was great. I do appreciate that. And if there's any interest in books, we have lots.
Just to let everyone know, I videotaped it, and sometime next week we'll put it on the libraries. We have a YouTube channel, or whatever you want to call it, so you can go to our website and then we'll link it out there. Thank you.